Uncomfortably Zoned with the Zigzag Man in Alameda, California, pushing on the doors of life marked pull and fighting the unholy trinity as we go. Big business, organized religion, and government.
I am back, and you are flying high over the zone with me, the Zigzag Man, from Alameda, California, right across the bay from San Francisco in the northern part of the state, in the United States of America, of course. And I'm thrilled to have on the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network a returner to these airwaves. His name is Brian Parrott, and I'm delighted to have you back.
Thanks, Ralph. No, it's good to be back. I'm in Iowa. We've got corn on the left and soybeans on the right, and it's a beautiful day, actually.
How did you end up in Iowa? Was there some sort of bet that was lost?
No. Actually, I won the bet. I won the lottery. I fell in love with that Midwest farmer's daughter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a...
That'll do her. Believe me. Love will conquer a lot of things. You can change where you live in a moment's notice.
Right.
Love.
So
that's
I
nice.
came back here, and, being born in New York and then moving to a smaller city like Los Angeles, and then I went to college in Seattle, and then went to Portland, Oregon, and then 7 years in Atlanta, Georgia. I was every place but the Midwest. And I like it. I don't even know what the word traffic means anymore because there's no stoplights in the county that green is in, and I'm about 8 miles away.
Of course,
from,
those intersections are bare sometimes, I'm sure. But
when the corn's high, you got to slow down and make sure nobody's coming on the gravel road from the other direction. But
right. Well, it's interesting. One of my favorite musicals when I was a kid, I grew up in New York, too, and I was blessed to have Broadway at my disposal as a kid. And it was The Music Man. And set in Iowa. And I've asked other Iowans this on my show. Does it ring true? Is there, I don't know if you remember the show. It was, there were several stories. There were several songs that there's nothing halfway about the Iowa way to greet you, that kind of thing. You could look in their eye for hours at a time and never see eye to eye, that kind of thing. What rings true about that? And were there misconceptions that you had before you moved? What's it about in Iowa?
Well, I mean, I would say, it's a interesting culture to see. Most people have two jobs, not just one job, and they don't even blink. And they're very resourceful. A farmer, can't call up and have somebody come fix it. He's got to fix everything themselves. And so they're very resourceful and creative with tools and tractors and everything else.
And you are literally living on a farm, is that it?
Yeah, it's a 160-acre farm, half corn, half soybeans, and it's.
Are you a gentleman farmer, or do you actually go out and do those things?
Well, we have the farm is we rent the farm to a farmer that's got all this gigantic equipment. Some of the combines are worth like $300,000-$400,000. They're big, and so. We rent the farm, and this a real good local neighbor or farmer. He does the planting and the harvesting and everything. So basically, we're not actually farming, but the land is in use, and he just pays per acre, and a lot of acreage is like that where they just people have invested, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in these machines, and so anyway, that's what we're doing. But I've gotten to know.
Now, is there pressure if harvests don't come in, if there isn't enough, whatever, the weather goes bad or the soil isn't tilled or
Yeah,
Stuff
no,
like that. You know what a New Yorker knows about farming, you could put in your eye and still read. So,
right. No, it's, but I've been picking up on a lot of stuff from, I've been here about 3 years, and one thing I can tell you is the weather reports are so good that they can tell you almost to the minute when something's, the rain's going to start, and then they keep you up to date on certainly on any tornado warning or anything. We have been north of that. We're about 75 miles directly below Rochester, Minnesota, and the Mayo Clinic. About 30 miles north to the Minnesota border, and but anyway, the weather is it's amazing to see how good the weather reports are, and then but as far as the crop, yeah, they're very sensitive to the amount of rain, and sometimes it rains so hard that it can flood the some of the properties.
But you just rent the property on a flat basis. It isn't doesn't depend on their profits or anything.
Well, no, they will pay $300 an acre, and then they go ahead and take the risk on it. They'll pay $300 an acre right now. It was $350 a year ago, and so it fluctuates with the price of corn and soybeans. But
right.
But that's about that. That's the way it goes.
And if the crop doesn't come in for one reason or another, you're still paid in advance.
Right. We would.
Okay.
We would be paid.
That's
but we want them to make a profit and be be solvent and everything. But yeah, you hear stories about farmers going bankrupt with bad crops and so anyway. But the corn is incredible. Honestly, he planted it in May, and by the 4th of July, it was 6 feet tall, and then it's over 8 feet tall now with the tassels. So It's just incredible how fast this stuff grows.
That is incredible. Again, having nothing to compare it to, I'm not prepared at this time to call Kathy Lee, but as far as I know, that's incredible.
Well,
yeah,
we're not.
No, the slow down in pace. You can't. How does that affect you? I mean,
well,
I know.
Yeah, you're right. In New York, everybody's honking the horn if you don't get off the light. So I explained to people here. I grew up in a completely different environment in New York. When there's within a 30-mile radius, there's 25 million people. Everybody's in a hurry. Here, it's a much different pace, but they keep working. They like to visit and chat, and and in a small town. I mean, the town that we live in. Our address is Greene, Iowa, and people in Iowa don't know where Greene is. It's only 1,500 people.
Right.
But then there's a city, Charles City, which is about 10 miles to the north, and they have a nice sports bar, which I'm grateful for. And then I'm the head tennis coach at the high school. I've met some people that like tennis and they play, and one of them he's got an 800-acre farm. He lives about 4 miles north, and he built a grass tennis court right next to his house. And he just got back from Wimbledon. He's been on the ground crew. He was on center court helping Wimbledon for the last 4 years. So he's a real avid tennis player. So I can play on grass, and then as the high school coach, there's public park, and we're trying to add 2 more courts. And then I'm instigating indoor tennis at a middle school that's been vacated. There's a new middle school. The old middle school has a gymnasium. It'd be perfect for 2 indoor courts. And then that's what I'm going to be doing. And then I'll be able to, the kids can play year round, and people are thrilled about the idea of having something to do in the cold weather. Indoor tennis will be a great addition to this little city.
Oh, that's terrific. Tennis is a wonderful sport. I have some roots in tennis. I play amateur, just play tennis. But beyond that, I had my father's first cousin owned the New York Sets, New York Apples at one time.
Is that right? The World Team Tennis?
Yeah, and you had Billie Jean King, and Fred Stolle was the coach back then in the early 70s, and that was pretty cool. But most of all, we both grew up in New York, and I grew up like 5 minutes from Forrest Hills, from, speaking of grass courts, and got to see great tennis growing up. It was.
Did you go to Forrest Hills and watch sometimes?
Absolutely. I have very, very vivid memories of going there with one of the camp counselors at Kittatinny. His name was Joel Blatt, and Joel Blatt was Milt Blatt's son, and they were tennis people. And we'd meet there in September after camp was out for the U.S. Open, back before pro tennis. That's how I'm 69, so this was in the 50s and the 60s, in the early 60s.
Right.
And there's a big difference. You're more of a maven on this. Tell me about how tennis went from the predominantly amateur ranks to the pro ranks, and how, if you would, and how Forrest Hills was affected, the U.S. Open. Can you talk about that?
Yes, I do. I do know about that. Well, I would, if you were to credit one man with getting tennis to open up and let the pros play in the Grand Slams, which they were denied once they turned pro. They weren't allowed to play Wimbledon. There was, or the U.S. Championships, or the French, or the Australian, and it was Jack Kramer, and Jack Kramer, ran the pro tour, and the best players in the world would join Kramer's tour, and they would go barnstorm from one town to the next, roll up a court, put down a court and play, tennis on one night in a gymnasium, roll it up and drive to the next town, and that's how pro tennis was.
I didn't know they would do that. I had no idea about rolling up courts and even back in those days.
Yeah.
So how would they transport? They'd have like a truck or a big truck. So, okay, gotcha.
It was a canvas court that they pulled tight. They would strap it in and pull it tight, and it had lines on it. And they would play over, basketball floors mostly, I'm sure, but sometimes even ice. If they went to a place and the only thing they had was an ice arena, they'd put it down over ice. But anyway, Poncho Gonzales was a great player. Was played on Kramer's tour, and Ponchos
Segura must have been on there, and maybe Don Budge. Was he still playing?
Well, Budge was part of there was pro tennis on, in Budge and Bobby Riggs. They had to turn pro to be able to make any money. There's a great line. I brought Jack Kramer to Portland, Oregon, where I was teaching a clinic for Wilson. And he told a funny story how in 1947 they wanted him to play Wimbledon because he had won the year before, and they paid him $5,000 to show up at Wimbledon. Now, the U.S. Tennis Association was the USLTA, Lawn Tennis Association back then, and the president of the USLTA came to Jack Kramer and said, Jack, tell me that's not true. You didn't actually take money to play. He said, I sure did. He said, I've got 5 boys. He said, you think I have a paper route on the side? I need the money. So he, no, anyway, but he was working behind the scenes to get.
Did he get bucks for putting his name on that wooden racket that everybody used? Everybody, their dog used.
Yeah.
I hope so. That's
he did fine with that, and he in California. He was a California boy, and he had opened up the Jack Kramer Club, and that's where Pete Sampras came out of, by the way, and Tracy Austin. It's on Palos Verdes. But he also got into golf course management, and so he did all right. And he was a big endorser for Wilson, through the years. But Jack Kramer, working behind the scenes, finally convinced everybody to say, well, the best players in the world don't get to play here. So it was 1968, and they opened tennis up and allowed the pros to play, but they still had amateurs. You still had to stay an amateur to play Davis Cup. So it was an evolution. The first prize in 1968 to win the U.S. championships was $14,000. And it was won by Arthur Ashe, and Arthur couldn't accept it because he wanted to stay eligible for Davis Cup. And so Tom Ocker, who lost in the finals to Arthur at Forrest Hills, took the first prize of $14,000. Now it's over $2 million.
A little inflation.
Yeah.
But you know what it costs to buy a ticket at Yankee Stadium, too. So everything in sports has gone up in proportion.
Right.
But that's crazy. All salaries, all this is crazy on one level, but they're paying the money. You can't ever blame the athlete. The athlete should take every dollar every time. And
well, the tennis tournaments do very well. The U.S. Open makes millions and millions for the USTA, which is a nonprofit organization to promote tennis. But they gigantic contracts with CBS, and then they draw 500,000 people through there, and the prices, for the box seats and the other sponsorships are significant, to say the least. And so, everybody's doing well, so anyway, my son Travis played 10 years on the pro tennis tour as a doubles specialist, and he won the U.S. Open mixed doubles in 2009. They beat 5 great teams to win the Open, and he won about $250,000 with that one. But anyway, it's an interesting thing to look back on. But it really, the game blossomed in that period of time. And Lamar Hunt was a Kansas City and Dallas man.
He was instrumental in the AFL. Lamar Hunt was.
Yes, and he also in tennis, he started a thing called WCT, World Championship Tennis, and he signed the pros like Laver, and they had a group called the Handsome Eight. Cliff Drysdale, Roger Taylor was another one, and they then called them the Handsome Seven plus Roach, because they couldn't actually say that Tony Roach could be called handsome. But
okay.
Anyway, it was the growth of tennis was exponential after the opening of the game, and then Billie Jean King started World Team Tennis, and as a matter of fact, I played against the Apples in 1977 for the Seaport Cascades, was this World Team Tennis team out of the Northwest, and I was the third guy. I was, Tom Gorman, who became Davis Cup captain later, was the player captain. Eric Van Dillen was a great doubles player for the University of Southern California. He played doubles, and Steve Doherty was a big Australian that served a 158-mile-an-hour serve. Actually, he was 6'4" and just crushed the ball. And Van Dillen's back went out, and Tom asked me to...
Van Dillen. I remember that name very well.
Eric, he's a Northern Cal guy, but he played for USC with Stan Smith and some of those guys. But anyway, Van Dillen's back went out. Tom said, can you sit on the bench so they don't fine us $500 for not having 3 men? And the 3 women were Big Bad Betty Stova was the top woman, and then Joanne Russell was a very good player, and Trish Bostrom was a good player from Seattle. So anyway, I sat on the bench, and it was against Chris Everett's team. We had 7,000 in Portland because of Chris Everett. And the final match was men's doubles, and the Seaport Cascades were way, way behind. And so somebody yelled out of the stands, put Parrott in. And so Tom looked at me, he said, you want to play? I said, sure. So I played in with Steve Doherty, and we beat Butch Waltz and Brian Chaney in the final match. And the crowd was, didn't have much to cheer about that night, but then they got behind me because I was a tennis pro, but I was ranked number 1 in the Pacific Northwest at that time in doubles. And so then Van Dillen's back never came around. So Tom said, can you come to New Orleans? We're playing Borg's team in the Superdome. And then we went to Boston. And then we went to New York. Now, here's this funny story. We walk into practice. It was out on Long Island. And we hear screaming, yelling, cursing, and somebody's destroying the metal tennis cans. It used to be metal cans. And
I remember,
going
yes.
ballistic.
You have to peel them off, right, with that metal that you
Right.
go around, right?
Right, yeah. You have to twist it off.
Like a can of cat food.
Right, exactly. Well, anyway, we were wondering what was all the commotion, and it was Billie Jean King had just gone ballistic because Fred Stolle had told Billie Jean she wasn't going to play singles that night, and Virginia Wade, who had just won Wimbledon, was going to play singles. And so, anyway,
I remember that team so very well, and I remember it was so cool to have a relative own it. You know, we go to cocktail parties with those. Stolle was a very, very classy man.
Yeah, he is a cool Australian. And
yeah.
So anyway, it was on television. Billy Talbot, who ran the U.S. Open, was one of the commentators. And the first match, you know, my relatives from New York, the word had been, you know, Brian's playing against the New York Apples. And so the first match that night was mixed doubles. And Billie Jean King and Ray Ruffles was the Australian lefty. They were the number one mixed doubles team in the league. And Billie Jean King played like a Tasmanian devil. She was so mad at Stolle, I guess. And we played, you know, they played no ad. So at deuce, you know, the next point won the game. And we had 3 no ads. We lost each one of them. We lost the set 6-love. It felt like it was in about 15 minutes. And most of my relatives didn't get out of the parking lot to actually see me play.
Oh,
and that was, but anyway, it was fun being part of the team. Sandy Mayer was also on that New York team. And
yes, a name that and Sandy I think had a brother that played as
Gene.
well. Gee, yes. Okay.
Yeah. That's the only brother combination to ever both be in the top 10 at the same time.
Whoa. I didn't know that. Now that
they were, Gene was a little bit...
There was a brother act that played doubles.
That's Luke and Murphy Jensen.
Yes. Very... they had personality, and they brought a lot to... You know, tennis is like you get personal with these guys, and the ones that can give a little personality helps a lot. You know,
absolutely. Well, they were the ones that developed the chest bump. You know, they would jump up and bump each other in the chest in the air, and now the Bryant twins have continued that. Bob and Mike Bryant have continued. You know that they leap in the air and bump each other. But Luke and Murphy were very entertaining. And Luke could serve with either hand, so we called him Dual Hand Luke. And then they were from Michigan. And Murphy was kind of a space cadet, but he was, you know, big and strong. And he's done very well in World Team Tennis recently as a coach of the Washington Castles, I think they're called. But they have a very wealthy owner, and he's paid up the money to get Venus Williams and, you know, Leander Paes plays doubles for them, and they've won the league like I think 5 years in a row, something like that. But anyway, at World Team Tennis,
you know, I have a funny story about World Team Tennis. My father's cousin, as I mentioned, Saul Berg, owned the sets, and he changed the name to the Apples, and he gave a speech at a cocktail party for the end of one of the seasons, and he said, you know, World Team Tennis has done one that made me a millionaire. I came into it as a multimillionaire. Now I'm a millionaire.
I know. You know, my dad used to refer to owning a minor league team as having a license to lose money. And so, but
yeah, for
now
those
I think
in the audience who don't know this, your dad was Harold Parrott, and he was a big instrumental person in the history of the Brooklyn and Los Angeles Dodgers. He was big in the front office. He served in a myriad of different capacities, and got to know the true Walter O'Malley a little bit. In the years of my doing this, the only sports person I can compare to Walter O'Malley is George Steinbrenner in terms of universally hated by so many people.
Right.
For the right reasons. None of it's made up. I've heard outrageous stories about Steinbrenner and, some magnanimous stories that present him in a magnanimous way as well. Haven't heard too many good stories about O'Malley, and when we spoke, you told the story on this air of how poorly he treated your dad, and I just wanted to mention what a scumbag he was. He was
a very devious man. I think it was Branch Rickey that said he's the most devious man I ever met in my life. It was either him or Red Barber, but I believe it was
could have been
Branch
either.
Rickey.
Could have been. When you think about the history, it could have been either.
Right.
Who would have said something like that. Let's stick to tennis for a second because
sure.
I'm a bit of a nut for it myself, and not on your level, of course. I want to know if you could tell me about Vitas Gerulaitis. If you could tell me anything that
I can tell you what. Well, the things that come to mind, I morphed into a promoter in Portland, and the first event that I brought in a Coliseum, I was Jimmy Connors and Eddie Dibbs. And then, so I got over the fear. I had run events at the club where we had 12 to 1,500 seats, and we had some great players, but we didn't, and then when I got a call from Donald Dell's office saying, how would you like to bring Jimmy Connors to town? It was 1980, and I said, yeah, definitely I would. How much money do I have to come up with? $20,000. So anyway, I did, and we had a successful event. And made a little money, and so I got me started promoting in bigger arenas. And so when Vitas Gerulaitis in 1983, I promoted two events, one in Portland and one in Tacoma, Washington, with Jimmy Connors and Vitas Gerulaitis. So
they play against each other.
Yeah, they were the main event, and.
Okay.
Vitas was a cool dude, and he was fun to be around. And I didn't really know him or get, but I knew I had followed him some because there was a quite a tennis person in Gene Scott who had coached Vitas and mentored him some as he was coming up. And so
don't know that
Vitas was he was fast as lightning, and he was terrific athlete. When I think of him, I'm kind of a technician when it comes to tennis in terms of coaching. I wish somebody had taught him how to serve better because he really didn't have serve was okay by the standards, but he was so quick and he was so athletic. He did fantastic. Obviously
made up for it.
Yeah, he really did. And so it's a shame, he was great friends with McEnroe. And
right. They matched up so well against each other. They had some great matches.
Yes, yeah.
Back in the day, yeah. Who won the tournament you sponsored and you brought in Connors? Did Gerulaitis beat him?
No, Jimmy was the star.
Okay.
They put on a good exhibition, but Jimmy was, he's a tough guy to beat, and he didn't like to lose. So Jimmy's the best exhibition player I ever saw, and he was great with the crowd, and he loved exhibitions. But he was I paid him $75,000 for the night, and still made money.
Nice.
So those guys, when they were playing 2 or 3 exhibitions a week, they're picking up $500,000 playing exhibitions. And so, I mean, the big names could get that, and Jimmy could. And actually, when in 1992, when Jimmy was 39 years old, I was trying to help a boy from Medford, Oregon, who was a world-class player. And I called Jimmy and I said, would you come and play this boy in Portland? And we agreed on $65,000. And then a month later, Jimmy goes to the U.S. Open and knocks off Aaron Krickstein in a thriller, and then Paul Harhus, I think, was the second one, and then Patrick McEnroe. And he went to the semifinals at 39 years old, and his star went back up. And when he came to Portland, it was a big deal. We had 8,000 people for him to play Jonathan Stark, who was a boy that played at Stanford. And then when he went out on the tour, Jonathan had a monster serve and was an excellent athlete. And he became number 1 in the world in doubles. And he won Wimbledon doubles with Martina Navratilova. And he didn't quite have the ground strokes to hold up in singles, but as the doubles player, he and Byron Black from South Africa were the number 1 team in the world for a while. And Jonathan, that was the boy I was trying to help.
Were you in Portland at the time when the Portland Rockies were up there, the baseball team?
The Portland Rockies, or are you?
Not the Beavers. After the Beavers left, the Portland Rockies, which were a Bend, Oregon single-A team, moved in the Northwestern League to
Hillsborough,
to Portland.
Okay. Well, I'm. Maybe this is fairly recent, I gather. Well,
this was in the 90s, in the mid-90s.
Well, the Beavers were there actually all the way through till when the Timbers kicked them out of the Civic Stadium, less than 10 years ago. I mean, the Beavers were playing.
They came back. You're right, but for a while the Beavers went somewhere else. We're talking about 2 different leagues too.
Yeah,
one
is like single A.
This was the single A league that was a short season A league, and the Bend Bucks moved to Portland, and they were playing in a AAA stadium, and they broke all kinds of Northwest League baseball attendance records, and it's a very cool team. And I went up and did a video documentary in 1995 of their first year. And I was just wondering if our times coincided.
You know what? That was the summer I was asked to move to Atlanta, Georgia, and run a tour stop on the ATP tours, the AT&T Challenge. And so we left that summer, so I missed that. And, I was in Atlanta from the summer of '95 through till about 2002.
Gotcha. Who was your favorite tennis player ever when you were a kid or through your promoting or your teaching? Who's your all-time besides your kid? Your son has to be your favorite, of course. We'll give you that.
I would answer that. My favorite to emulate on the backhand was Ken Rosewall. Rosewall was
he was a backstop.
Yeah,
right.
He was about my size, a little bit. He was like 5'7" and I'm 5'8" maybe. But anyway, he had a beautiful slice backhand, so that I emulated that. I always, and I still to this day, believe that if you put all of these great players, tennis players, in the same era and let them fight it out, I would say Poncho Gonzales was the greatest of all time. He was 6'2", moved like a cat, had a big serve, and was the fierce competitor. And he I think Gonzales would come out on top. You see, in those days, as you're recalling these, stories, three of the four slams were on grass. And hitting a topspin on grass, particularly if there's a slightly bad bounce, there wasn't a topspin backhand until Rod Laver came along. But anyway, Gonzales had a nice slice backhand, a good forehand, and covered the net and great overhead and big serve. And so, but anyway, everybody had a kind of a slice backhand, maybe a flat, but topspin didn't happen off the backhand until Rod Laver did it. And then that brought in the topspin era. And Borg, of course, was...
For those of you out there, that's where you come over the ball.
Right.
And
yeah.
As opposed to literally slicing it.
Coming
through
over the ball.
Yeah. May I ask you? You mentioned Gonzales. I have a paperback tennis instructional book that I've had in one form or another over the years. Buy them, give them away, lend them out, rebuy them. That Gonzales put out there is a picture book that shows, just teaches you how to play with perfect form. I don't know if you know the book I'm talking about, and if you've ever used it in your instruction or if you've learned from it. Do you know the one I'm talking about?
Well, I can picture it. The one that I thought was
it's a great book with him on the cover. It's a great book. I wondered if that was a big book in your life because I think it was. It shows every stroke at every angle, and again with Poncho, his form was absolutely perfect. If you as a technician, do you agree with that?
I do. I mean, he was smooth as silk, big and strong and fast, and and he had a very simple, compact motion. His serve was so big that they started on the Pro Tour before it opened up. They made him serve. They moved the line back behind the baseline, and to try to give them a little bit better chance of putting his ball in play. If Gonzales would have been allowed to play Wimbledon during his prime, he would have Wimbledon was grass, Australia was grass, and so was the U.S. Championships was grass. He would have had 25 Grand Slams. I mean, nobody was beating him. That's how good he was. It's a shame, but that's what happened in open tennis. The best players in the world were not allowed to play Grand Slams. But anyway.
This has been terrific. Totally unexpected. We talked off the air. We were going to cover a different topic. The one we'll cover when you come back the next time.
All right, great. Well, I love talking tennis. It's been my racket for a long time. And actually, I'll tell you something I'm working on right now is establishing an American Tennis Hall of Fame, which a lot of people would say, you mean there isn't an American Tennis Hall of Fame? And the answer is no, there isn't. And so there really should be. And suggesting it, I've written up.
Is there an International Tennis Hall of Fame? Excuse my ignorance.
Yes, there is, in Newport, Rhode Island. And there's the International, and a lot of the great Americans have been put into that. But there's a lot of coaches and players that will never get into the International Tennis Hall of Fame that should be recognized for American tennis. One of them being Dick Gould of Stanford, who has won 17 NC2A titles. And that's, John Wooden won 10. Dick Gould won 17 NC2A titles.
Whoa.
And, he should
McEnroe talks about going to Stanford.
Right. He went there for 1 year and played for Dick Gould. And then he won the NC2As as a freshman, one of only a handful. The only ones that have won it as a freshman were John McEnroe, Jimmy Connors won it as a freshman at UCLA, Billy Martin won it at UCLA, who's now the coach at UCLA, and Poncho Segura won 3 in a row, but he wasn't allowed to play as a freshman. There was Gardner Malloy, was a great player from Florida, and he was on a clinic tour through South America. In Ecuador, he saw this kid. He said, why don't you come and play for me at the University of Miami? It was Poncho Segura. And Poncho won the NC2A title 3 straight years. And that's never been done.
A little guy, a stocky guy, Poncho Segura. Strong as can be with that compact little swing of his. He played a lot against the other Poncho, too.
Yeah, big Poncho and little Poncho. And Poncho Segura is still alive. He's 94. He lives in down in San Diego area.
Wow.
He taught at La Costa.
Cool to know. That is, you can survive just on beer, huh?
Well, he did pretty well. I've been asked to write a book, Ralph. My father wrote the book, The Lords of Baseball, and it was his 35. And the book, is a great book, and it's a wry look behind the scenes of Major League Baseball. And it was used heavily for the movie 42. A lot of the stories came straight out of Dad's accounts for what happened when he was traveling secretary. People have said I should write a book, and I go at first I'd like, well, who would want to read a book by me? But I can see it now. But what I'm going to do is write a book, and it's going to be The Lords and Ladies of Tennis. And it's been, I have saved so many pictures and clippings and letters and things that I think it's going to turn out to be a very good book.
What a great title. Given everything, that is a superb title.
Well, it's in the Parrott tradition.
Absolutely, yes.
I can write The Lords and Ladies of Tennis, but one chapter will be Billie Jean King, of course, and then another one McEnroe and Connors, and so those are people I have had interaction with. Arthur Ashe would be another one, and Boris Becker and Lendl. I ran Lendel's first exhibition. It was interesting, him coming out of communist Czechoslovakia. So I think people will enjoy it. It'll probably start out with I've got a collaborator who's a professional sports writer in Portland, Oregon, named Carrie Eggers. And Carrie's written 6 books. Clyde Drexler's autobiography is one, and Bill Schonley, who was the Chick Hearn of the Trailblazers, he did his too. But it'll be Lords and Ladies of Tennis by Brian Parrott with Carrie Eggers, and it'll be, I'm going to tell everybody, I'm writing a book. I've got a lot of positive things to say, but I'm also going to tell stories that happen, things that happen, and I'd like to give them a chance to respond. So,
hey, what was Lendl like? He because of his look and the language barrier, no one got to know him.
No, that's right.
No one. Was he a good guy?
Yes, he really had a great sense of humor, honestly. And when I ran the exhibition, he played against Roscoe Tanner, and it was the Peugeot Tennis Invitational, and it was his first American exhibition. And he came off the plane. I picked him up. He said, "Oh, so you're a friend of Tom Gorman's?" I said, "Yeah, that's right. We went to college together." And there had been his agent. This will be one of the stories in the book. Had threatened me that he would have a sprained ankle if I didn't get him out of the clinic at 4:00 and get him out of the 4-game fun match with the disc jockey. I had a friend, a morning DJ, that was going to play 4 games while people were taking their seats, just hit and giggle. But it was a great promotion for the exhibition, Jimmy Hollister, KEX Radio. And the agent threatened me and said, if you don't get him out of that stuff. I said, well, it's in the contract. It's the same thing we did with Jimmy in 80 and 81, and now this was the 3rd edition of the Peugeot Tennis Invitational. he said, well, let me put it to you this way. If you don't get him out of that stuff, he could develop a sprained ankle before coming to Portland Monday night. And so he's threatening to pull the plug on me. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know whether it was Lendl was going to be that difficult or that he wouldn't actually speak to kids. We had a clinic of 300 coaches and parents and kids. And anyway, I called Tom Gorman, my friend from college who was on the tour and was also a player for Pro Serve. And I said, Tom, who is Jerry Solomon? He said, well, he's one of the agents there. And I said, well, can you pick up the phone immediately and call him and tell him that I know what I'm doing? I was figuring he was thinking I was going to work Lendl to death and out in Portland, Oregon, and there in Washington, D.C. And so I decided not to tell a soul. And I was sweating bullets when I picked him up at the plane, like, are you, So when he got off the plane and he had a big smile, and he needed orthodonture at the time. I don't know if he's done.
Right, that's what it was. It looked like, he had kind of buck teeth.
Well, he had, his mouth was full. I mean, what orthodontists would pull a few of those. But anyway, as we were driving, I said, can you tell me what's the real story why you haven't been playing Wimbledon? He was number one in the world, wouldn't play Wimbledon. And they said he was allergic to grass. Well, that got blown up when they saw him playing golf. So that was just a lie put out probably by Pro Serve. I said, what's the real reason? He said, the real reason I don't play Wimbledon is I don't like the British. He said he didn't like the two locker rooms and the caste system, basically, where the British, if you're a big name, they treat you special. If you're not, they don't treat you quite as well. And they have two locker rooms. So they have the upper crest locker room and they have the rookie locker room and stuff like that. So anyway, I said to Lendl, if somebody of your stature, said that, it might affect him some. But anyway, on the way into the airport, I said, what's your understanding of today's schedule? He said, I don't know. He talked so fast, I didn't understand. I said, all right, here's what we're doing. We've got a clinic at 4 o'clock. I'm going to bring you and Roscoe out, just ask you some questions, when you started practicing or what, blah, blah, blah. So he couldn't, and then I said, do you follow American football at all? I said, I've got you playing 4 games with Neil Lomax, a quarterback, is a friend of mine, and he's going to play with you for 4 games with the disc jockey and Roscoe. And then he said, you're the boss. Whatever you say, I do it. He couldn't have been better. He was absolutely terrific. And he was funny. And I'll tell you one thing happened in the clinic. He was telling kids to work on their weaknesses. He said, every year, pick one thing and work on your weaknesses. And he said, I used to hate to return left-handed serving. So I hired this guy, Van Winitsky, to serve to me left-handed for 1 month. And so then Roscoe's got a microphone. He says, oh, you don't like left-handed servers, huh? He deadpanned. He looked at Roscoe. He said, Roscoe, I said used to. And so it was great.
That's good. He's that quick.
He was quick. And then in the 4-game fun match, they tied 2-2. I was calling, and he comes over, takes the microphone from me, and he says, okay, now that we are tied, my partner, who was 6'5" and a quarterback, he will flip Roscoe's partner, who was, had polio as a child and was pasty, white-legged disc jockey. My partner will flip Roscoe's partner to see who wins. So I did ask him. I said, why did, you've got a great sense of humor. Why don't you let that come out? As soon as the microphone goes in front of him, he just goes, yes, no, and he said to me, he said, I don't know what they want me to say, so I say nothing. Meaning, I'm sure the communists were monitoring everything he was doing in 1982. So, he wouldn't expound on anything. He never let his personality show.
Now, did he have to leave his family behind to come here?
I don't know that. I don't know. I'm hoping.
Could he have visitors, or you don't know any of that?
I don't. I'm going to see him in New York, I hope, because he's going to be one of the chapters of the Lords and Ladies because he changed the game, and with his gigantic ground strokes and his discipline for conditioning and everything. And I saw him at the U.S. Open a few years ago, and we had a nice visit, and he remembered coming to Portland. And after that exhibition, I lined up an exhibition with Boris Becker in Lendl before Becker won Wimbledon. So the sponsor, I said, it'll sell out in Portland because everybody's seen Boris. Boris won our tournament in January, and they said, well, who is Boris Becker? And this was Peugeot. And so I couldn't convince them to do it, but Lendl was ready to play, and Becker was thrilled. We were going to pay Boris $5,000 just for the chance to play Lendl. But the Peugeot said, no, we'll go with Connors and Gerulaitis. So that was what we did in '83.
That had to be a fun match, for sure.
Yeah.
Any bad eggs in your, I guess you're a producer, that you had to deal with, not just the agents, but any of the players who were just men or women who were just
difficult?
Bad eggs. That's the best way I can put it.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I would have to say, I'll tell you what happened, and I think he's mellowed. In fact, I'm sure he has. But Pat Cash came to Portland for the Davis Cup in '84, and I was running it. And one of the boys that I coached was the driving for Australia, and I hear from John St. Clair, Cash is complaining about the size of the flags on the van, and he's complaining about all kinds of stuff. So that's all right. Okay, so then I find out after he loses to McEnroe on the first day, Ed Fabricus was the head of communications for the USTA, and he was trying to bring Cash in for his press conference interview after the match. And Cash told Ed Fabricus to F off and that he wasn't going to do the interview. And when I heard that from one of my assistants, Pat Cash just told Ed Fabricus that, I can't use that on the radio, right? So Ed just F
No,
off.
you can on this radio. This is podcast. You can say anything you want.
Okay.
I already called O'Malley a fucktard.
All right. Well, anyway.
In your father's honor, for Christ's sake. Say anything you want.
Okay. Well, anyway, so I was going to say something to Cash because, he was 19 years old and he shouldn't treat a 47-year-old man like that. And I was going to say, when are you going to apologize to Mr. Fabricus? So he was doing his job. But I didn't. I was running the event. I didn't seek him out, and I wasn't with him. Monday morning, I'm in the hotel, everybody's checking out, and the driver that I mentioned earlier came to me a little bit shook, and he said, Brian, you should probably come up and take a look at Cash's room. He destroyed it. And I said, okay, well, so I go by the transportation desk and say, does anybody have a camera? And Sandy Limbs was there and said, yeah, I got a camera. I said, all right, let's go up and we'll see what happens. Well, there were 5 rackets that were smashed into the walls and into the dresser drawers, and he just must have gone ballistic in the room. And I would say at least $500 worth of damage, probably more. And so, anyway.
$5,000 worth of damage, you say?
Yeah, well, it was a lot. Whatever it was,
okay.
So I had pictures taken of me next to the holes in the wall so people could see how big the holes in the wall were and the chips out of the desk and the dressers. And so, anyway, I then contacted the U.S. Tennis Association, Davis Cup chairman. I said, Cash destroyed his room. I said, you want me to file a report to the Australian Tennis Association? And he said, Gordon Jorgensen was the man's name. He said, yes, definitely. They're always complaining about McEnroe. Now they've got a problem because Cash was, had a temper. So I was going to file a report to the Australian Tennis Association, but I didn't keep it a secret. And I was on the radio with my friend, the disc jockey, and he said, anything happened, I told him about it. So by the word got back to New York. Neil Amder was the writer, and was the editor for World Tennis Magazine. He called me and he said, Brian, did something happen with Pat Cash out in Portland? I said, well, yeah, as a matter of fact, he told Ed Fabricus to fuck off, and then he destroyed his room. And he said, you don't have any pictures, do you? And I said, as a matter of fact, I do. And he said, would you send them to me for World Tennis Magazine? I said, well, it depends on how you use them. I don't think it should be a big witch hunt or anything, but he did do it. He said, no, I'll use it on the back page in a humorous fashion. He had his last page in that magazine was sort of funny photos or whatever around the world. So I said, okay. So I sent the pictures to Neil Amder of World Tennis Magazine. And when they got to Australia in the January issue, the shit hit the fan for Cash because the Australian press called from Melbourne. Is this true? Can we quote you? I said, yeah, you can quote me. And he said, good on you, mate. We can't get anybody down here to say anything. He was just fined $2,000 by the tournament director of the Australian Tennis Association because he went off on him about being scheduled too early. So I said, no, you can quote me, and that's what he did. And so then he got his father involved and said, well, you're a hypocrite. You'd never do that to the American team. And I go, like, he can say whatever he wants. I said, that's what he did. And anyway, the next time I saw Cash was about 2 years later, and he spotted me, and it was an exhibition with Yannick Noah. It was supposed to be Yannick Noah and Boris Becker. And Becker was supposed to play Yannick. Yannick didn't come back for the exhibition, so at the last minute they had to get Pat Cash. And the company I was working with and for, Louisiana Pacific, was a presenting sponsor. And so anyway, Cash sees me. He said, there you are, you fucking asshole. You're a fucking asshole, and everybody knows it. You know, he screamed at the top of his lungs at me. And I go, I'm not surprised at your reaction. I said, good luck tonight against Boris. So anyway, I apparently got through to him for what little gray matter he had at the time. So that was one that I had a run-in with. But in 1990,
that's a good one. He didn't have a long career, Cash. He was a real flash in the pan.
Bad back. He had his service motion. He was so strong, but he really he put so much strain on his lower back. The way that he served, it would be like a pitcher not shifting to third base and then coming back with your body. He was like facing home plate the whole time, just throwing with his arm, and that eventually takes its toll. And I think it was the technique on his serve that messed him up. But he
bad form. You put your arm into it instead of your whole body, and your hips.
Exactly. Yeah.
He had these big plodding legs. He was very slow, right? That's all.
Yeah, very, real strong. His father was a rugby star, I think, in Australia.
And a professional hotel room destroyer in his own right.
He was there. Now, in 1996, that happened in 84. 12 years later, I'm the tournament director in Atlanta, Georgia for the AT&T Challenge, and guess who wants a wild card? We had 3 singles wild card. One of them, Pat Cash.
And he has to come to you to get it?
Right.
Oh, beautiful. Karma.
So anyway.
I love that. We're both New Yorkers. We can appreciate that. Other people can't.
Yeah. Well, it was. Anyway, I gave it to him because I thought it was good for the tournament. And we had a civil conversation about, as it turned out, anyway. I've had a few run-ins. Another one.
Was there an apology?
I think kind of.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Maybe something like, if I wasn't such an asshole, I wouldn't have done that.
Yeah, you remember a player from New Jersey named Fritz Buning?
Well, I got a siren going on. I hope it's not for me.
Yeah.
I'll be the last to know. What, would you repeat that?
Fritz Buning, did you ever remember hearing it?
No, I don't. That name doesn't ring a bell.
Well, anyway, Fritz was 6'5", and He played for UCLA, and when I saw him in New York in 2011, he said to me, "Was I a jerk when I was out there playing in your tournament?" I said, "Yes, you were, Fritz. You were." He had a problem with his temper, and I said, and he said, "Oh, I'm so sorry." He had behaved badly everywhere. So, but he would mellowed. He's working for McEnroe at McEnroe's Tennis Academy now. But anyway,
there was a guy that you mentioned, UCLA, in the 80s. His name was Mott, I think. Does that ring a bell?
Last name Mott, M-O-T-T?
M-O-T-T. Does that ring a bell?
Yes, Steve Mott. He was from, I think, San Diego area.
Okay. Steve Mott came up to play in Sacramento at the time, had this, it's like a minor league pro tournament going on in the 80s.
Yeah.
Do you remember what that might have been?
I don't know. It might have been a satellite tournament or something.
It was a satellite tournament, guys who just turned pro. Steve Mott comes up to Sacramento, and I was working in just helping guys get to the airport and back for the tournament. Logistics, that kind of thing. Picked him up at the airport, brought him back to the apartments that the apartment I was renting that had a tennis court in the little quad that I was in, and I got to work him out a little bit, and he was just a terrific guy. The only thing I could tell you, just unassuming. It wasn't the biggest tournament in the world, but he was a pro tennis player. Didn't have to be as nice as he was. So I just wanted to mention that. And also, maybe you can help recall this. There was a guard for UCLA basketball that played tennis as well. And I'm trying to think. He played around the time that Lucius Allen played.
Well, there was a good guard that played, but he played, I think, for Maryland, was John Lucas. He was a very good tennis player.
John Lucas was a tremendous basketball player, and yes, a tennis player as well. But this wasn't him, the fellow that I'm thinking of.
I'm not sure.
I might have to die curious about that.
Well, no, I could find out. I could find out for you because I got a lot of UCLA friends that would remember. The other guard that
Wooden, and he was like a third guard, and he also played tennis, and he was really good.
Boy. I don't remember who that is at the moment myself, but Slick Watts was a Seattle Sonic. He was a good tennis player. Slick Watts.
Oh, I didn't know that. He still has I'll bet wherever he's probably 60 years old, he wears a band around his head. A sweatband.
Right.
Wherever he is, whatever he's doing, he goes out for a smoke, got to put the sweatband on. That's
right. That's his mark. It's
right?
Right. No, he wore it all the time. Yeah, he was very popular in Seattle. That's where I went to college in Seattle, and I still have lots of friends up there. And Lenny Wilkens actually played a little bit of tennis.
Boys High. Lenny Wilkens played with Tommy Davis at Boys High. Tommy Davis, the baseball player.
Right.
At Boys High when I was a kid. And was first black coach, if I'm not mistaken, in the NBA.
Yeah, I think so.
I could be wrong on that, but I think he was.
But I've got a Lenny Wilkens connection, and this is a basketball name that you might remember. He lived with us. He lived with us on the third floor after he got out of the seminary. Then he tried the FBI, and then he was trying to figure out what he was.
Egan?
No, his name was Mulaney, Joe Mulaney.
Joe Mulaney, I remember that name too. There was an Egan that played with at Providence with Lenny.
Right, Joe was his coach. Joe was the coach at Providence, and he had also been the captain of the Holy Cross 1947 NC2A championship team. He was a guard. And Cousy was the other guard. And so anyway, Joe was staying with us. He'd pick me up at school, let me drive on his lap in the Studebaker. Then we were away.
With the little vents on the side with the Studebaker, right?
Yeah, it was a Studebaker that Mr. Rickey had given to the Dodgers. And anyway, Joe was with us, and Dad said, Joe, you can stay here as long as you want, but you've got to get a job. And so Dad pushed him out of the house, and he got a coaching job at a small college, St. Joseph's, but not the one in Philadelphia. There's some other St. Joseph's. And his second job was Providence. And he recruited out of Brooklyn Lenny Wilkens and turned Lenny into a guard, even though Lenny had played very little basketball.
Lenny only went one way, if I remember. It was either left or right. I think it was left.
And, he's left-handed.
Yeah, he played with the St. Louis Hawks later on with Guerin, and that was he was a tremendous ball player. He was very good and a great do.
Yeah, he was
doing dues before Wes Unseld.
Yes, you're right. Well, he was
Lenny was a good
assistant coach on the Dream Team in '92. Lenny, the head coach, was the guy from Michigan. I'm trying to think of his name. And then the assistant coaches were Krzyzewski, Lenny Wilkens, the guy that got choked in the throat, P.J. Cardelissimo.
Oh, yes.
But anyway, Lenny was...
By that guard out here who had another flash in the pan with a bad brain, who was tremendously skilled. Made first team All-Pro when Michael played when Michael Jordan played baseball. And I can't see the guy. That's good that I can't think of his name because he was an asshole.
Yeah.
What can you say?
But anyway, there've been some tennis players that, you know, who likes to play tennis, and I played with him every time he came to Portland. He called me Ahmad Rashad.
Yeah. I'll be darned.
He's a good friend of McEnroe's, and
he's a Facebook friend, as a matter of fact, and a real good friend of my friend Lenny Randall. So I'm thinking in my head, future guest with that guy. Very, very good. I'm thinking of one other guy who played tennis. Oh, it was me. I went down the weekend that Gerald Ford pardoned Nixon in 1975 or 76, right around there, or even a year or so before, whatever it was. I went to Caesar's Palace to see Frank Sinatra Jr., and Nancy Sinatra on the same stage. And I don't even think about that much. What I think about is that I went out in the back courts they had tennis courts at Caesar's Palace.
Right.
You go out and sign up for, whoever was there. Signed up Willie Davis of the Dodgers and Dustin Hoffman. There was one other guy. I was in a foursome. We played doubles with those two. Willie Davis was a good tennis player. Dustin Hoffman, not so much so. Ralph Tyko, not so much so. But Willie Davis was a quick, any professional athlete. I'll tell you one more quick tennis story. As an amateur, just playing tennis, hitting the ball all my life, right?
Right.
I'm in Danville, California. I have an insurance agency, and I'm trying to recruit a guy a hockey player for the Seals. And his name was Stan Gilbertson. I remember this like it was yesterday because when he gave me an application for employment, it was in pencil. But that's all right. I didn't care. He was a great guy. And I taught him how to play tennis. And I went out and gave him 2 lessons. And because of his professional skills, his hands, and within a week he was kicking my ass. Absolutely. He could. I'll tell you what. Hockey players with quick hands. Any athlete transforms to tennis. Tennis is will show your athletic skills in every way.
You brought up hockey, and in Portland we were hosting the Memorial Cup, which was the junior hockey sort of Stanley Cup, and the Winterhawks were in this Memorial Cup, and we were a sponsor, Louisiana Pacific. So the man that owned the Winterhawks, Mr. Shaw, called me and said, Wayne Gretzky wants to play tennis. Would you play with him? I said, sure. That'd be fun to meet him. So I went and picked up Wayne Gretzky, and I hopped in the car, and I took him to the Irvington Club. And by the time we got there, he said, why don't you just give me a lesson? So I said, okay. So I watched him hit a little bit, and he was trying to hit a backhand with the wrong grip. And I said, Wayne, here's what it is. You got to get your hand further over. And then I showed him the follow-through, and it was amazing. I'm serious. Within 3 or 4 minutes, he was ripping the backhands across, and his timing was perfect, and his balance was perfect. And so he would have been an incredible tennis player also, Wayne Gretzky. And he couldn't have been a nicer guy, just like everybody said. And anyway, it was amazing to see, a pure athlete, if you give him the technical things like grips and explain the balance and stuff, and they can pick it up so fast. It's amazing.
Absolutely. So you gave the initial tennis lesson of bend your knees, watch the ball, bend your knees. That'll be $5, please.
That's right. That's a skiing one too. Bend your knees, $5, please. But it was I coached up there, and I've been recently nominated for the Oregon Sports Hall of Fame, and so they asked me to go through with the resume and all that stuff, and I looked it up, and I coached over 50 Oregon State champions in my career teaching there, from 1970 through 1995. I mean, I had 2 girls, each one at 6A, won the 4 straight titles, and another one at 4A won 4 straight titles. And then I had a lot of kids that went and played college, and a few that made it all the way to Wimbledon and played. But anyway, I enjoyed teaching and working with kids, and that's what I'm doing here in Iowa. I'm the head coach at the local high school. Had 29 girls out this year, and I said, can we start a boys team? And so we're going to have a boys team next year, and then I'm working on getting indoor tennis courts in this little town.
Put Iowa on the map. Green Iowa.
Well, it's actually Charles City is the place where the middle school was vacated, and it's perfect for 2 indoor courts. And I'll get 2 of those Supreme courts, that you roll in for exhibitions, and just put it down, and then put a top layer of Plexipave or whatever they call it now, and then have 2 indoor courts. Put the backdrops up, and the lighting's perfect. So we'll have indoor tennis, and within 3 or 4 years, I'd say, we'll be competing for the state title, because the kids could play year-round. And if I can get to a kid when he's 8 years old or 8 or 9, by the time they're 15, 16, their strokes are there, and they can, if they like it, they can continue to develop.
Do you teach backhand first to make it because everybody seems to have a weakness in the backhand. Yeah, not everybody, but of course, it's easier to hit a forehand in one way, but in another way, it's a much more natural. The backhand is a much more natural stroke.
You're correct. I mean, the backhand. What makes the backhand more natural? One thing is that the body stops the arm from going back too far. And so you bring it back till the inside of your forearm is against your stomach. And then when you learn how to lock the wrists properly, lay the wrist back and cock the wrist up a little, and then follow through in with the straight arm.
Lock. Cock and lock. That is
right.
Expression that I'm sure you've used.
Well, yeah.
No, really. Yeah. You get your grip in and coming over the top. Boy, you got me. I'm going out to the tennis wall as soon as I hang up.
Well,
I got the bug.
Well, good. Well,
the wall is unrelenting. That's the thing.
right.
And it doesn't matter. You could learn more in the wall than anywhere else in the world. You could.
Who's the biggest advocate for the wall? The wall, and this is one thing the USTA should do, is get Jimmy Connors to show how he works out in a half an hour. You can get more out of a wall, and the way Jimmy works on a wall, he'd rather play against a wall than a human being, and that way they should just have him do demonstration of getting against a wall and how you can improve your game. Because you can do everything. You can serve and you can bounce it before the wall and hit overheads and all kinds of stuff.
Well, nice. Nice for me this time because I've used that all my life in terms of just working myself out. You want to go faster, you can go faster. You want to hit harder, you hit harder. You want to practice something, the idea is to hit it you want it to hit that spot and come back to you where you want it. And I'll tell you another story. I had a Greek fella. He was a physician. He's an emergency room technician and a physician. He just comes over to this country, buddy of mine in Sacramento. And I used to have this little thing that was weighted down with a big plastic string, and you hit the ball and it comes back to you. You ever see one of those?
Yeah, I did. I have seen it. Yeah.
And that works. But if you don't have a wall, that works beautifully. And this is my buddy who comes to the court, and he's a little late, and I'm hitting that thing back and forth. He goes, "Whenever you use that tennis masturbator, you kick my ass." That's what he called it. A tennis masturbator. I said, "What? You call it what you want."
Yeah.
But that was 30 years ago, too, and I remember that because, that gets you down, get your stroke going, whatever it is that you use to warm up. And, this has been terrific. The conversation, like I say, went in a totally different direction, and a pleasant one. I enjoy your company in yet another way. So,
okay, well, thanks, Ralph. I didn't know you had an interest in tennis either, so.
I didn't either until I met you.
But anyway.
No, it's all coming back. I have an interest in anything with a ball or a puck or a stick or a bat. Just getting out there. And if you had to tell something to the kids, just tell them to do what they like, whatever sport they like.
Right.
Choose it. It doesn't have to be tennis. It doesn't have to be rugby. It doesn't have to be anything but what they want it to be. And if you have a passion for it, and a dream, keep that dream going.
Yeah.
So can't wait to have you back next time, Brian.
Okay, Ralph. Thanks very much. Take care. And I guess
we will talk again. Pardon me?
I have an Oakland question for you. When I lived in Portland, I was trying to promote the idea that we should invite the owner of the Oakland Athletics up to Portland and show him where we could put a stadium right in downtown in the post office venue and build it. We had $500 million in place, $350 million from the tribes, and another $150 million for stadium construction. And just to see if he would, consider moving the athletics up to Portland. And
I have so much pull with this guy. You have no idea.
Well, how?
No. He is we're talking about Mr. Wolf, who could buy Portland if he really wanted to.
Yeah.
Strange. One of my people I have as a regular on my network. I do a show each week with Peter Golenbach, who lives in Tampa. And Tampa and Oakland, the Rays and the A's, have identical stadium situations, identical political situations, and it's horrible to, just to see what baseball is doing with the Giants owning the territorial rights to San Jose and not relinquishing on that, and the A's playing in a dump of a ballpark. And I could see a case being made for Portland as a major league team. Sure.
Yeah.
Who has the funding?
What's the latest with? He's been trying to build a stadium for like 5 years now, hasn't he? Someplace.
Well, people are trying to build one for him. That's what it comes down to. And I think the Giants set a very good / bad example. The Giants people financed it all themselves. And it makes a big difference in today's day and age. Yet, you know what? Cities are blind to the fact that a team, you could put a stadium in a bad area, like South of Market in San Francisco with the Giants' new stadium, and instantly the entire area is rejuvenated.
Exactly.
So voters and the powers that be don't look at it as an investment. They look at it as an expenditure, and it's absolutely wrong. Whatever tax breaks the city gives these developers, it's well deserved. It comes back to the city in terms of the restaurants, everything around the city, the pride in the city. So
you're 100%
in Oakland, they're frustrated by this because the powers that be in the city government. Jerry Brown was the governor for a while. It was the mayor of Oakland for a while. He poo-pooed the importance of sports. And what's going to happen is this. First of all, the basketball team, the Warriors, are looking to build in San Francisco. They've announced they are gone. Football team, they may still be in. They may share a stadium in Podunk, Iowa. Oh, wait a minute. Didn't mean to say it that way. Could you imagine having the Raiders in green?
Well, they would. The Raiders, yeah. I mean, if Iowa is big football, the Hawkeyes and all that. But
I know that.
Yeah.
I was just speaking.
But anyway, the Raiders are they thinking about Los Angeles too?
Right, they're thinking about Los Angeles, and the A's are just in limbo. They just signed an extension on the dump that they're in, which really is an antiquated dump. Backing up and poor sight lines and just you're away from the action. It's just the way it is. And also, it's a strange fan base. You got a basic, great fan base, but given everything, it's just this trade deadline. Look what they did. They traded Reddick and Hill, their best position player and their best pitcher, if not Gray, but Hill, and they give them away for some really good prospects. Yet again, the same thing happened with Donaldson. Traded him. It's just horrible. So I would. How do you approach Wolf? How are you guys planning to?
I got
approach
through
Wolf?
to his an assistant, and he said, "No, we're focused." I offered that we would fly him up. I have a friend with a private jet, and that we would bring him up and take a look at this downtown location. It's 14 acres in downtown Portland, in the Pearl District, and it would revitalize Chinatown is there, and it's and it would be walking distance for the hotels. All of the transportation systems, the rail lines come right through there. Plenty of parking across the river at the where the Trailblazers play, and so it's an ideal location. And then the fact that the tribes have offered $350 million. They want to have a casino in Portland in exchange for the $350 million. Now, politicians say, oh, we can't have a casino in downtown Portland. Well, my suggestion was put it on the river, have a riverboat gambling, which would be a tourist attraction, and have two of them, and have one called the Lewis and one called the Clark, and then have them, they can go out onto the Columbia and be mobile, but they have historically themed riverboat casino would be great for tourism, and on the weekends people would fly into Portland and for the restaurants and then the little bit of gambling and entertainment on the riverboat. But the politicians wouldn't, they're not at the point where I ran for the city council trying to explain these things. And then the other thing is if the owner wanted to sell the team, if we could find a way to build a stadium, and that would be, the other $150 million on top of the $350 the tribes have offered, comes from they passed in Salem. Ryan Deckert was the guy that put it through. He did a great job. And if a major league team comes, the state will loan $150 million, and to be paid down by the 25 millionaires that would move in, the baseball players. And so
right.
It's not new tax money. And so, and there, if they wanted to, if we could build a stadium there, would they move it? And if they wanted to sell it, we have a man in Portland who has told the mayor, if you can find a way to build a stadium, I'll buy the team. And
okay.
And he's a man that certainly could buy the team. And he didn't.
I don't think Wolf wants to sell. That's one of the
if I was Wolf, I'd say, why don't you take a minority ownership, and then and bring up to Portland. In a great location. Now, that the land was just sold by the post office because they're going to move out by the airport, and it's prime. It would be a downtown stadium, and that would be awesome. But anyway,
Portland's changing, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, tell me how so. Because when I used to go up. I was the Tops representative in the Northwest League for a lot of years in the 80s and 90s, and I'd sign players to their minor league contracts with Tops. So I traveled the Northwest 13 summers in a row. Haven't been there since 95. How has it changed since 95?
Well, it's, blossoming is certainly the high-tech industry. Intel now has 17,000 employees in Hillsborough, which is the suburb of Portland. And Nike has grown tremendously. And then Adidas is headquartered there. Now Under Armour is moving in its headquarters into Portland. And then Columbia Sportswear is there. That's a billion-dollar company. And then the wood products industry, while it was decimated by the environmental movement, it's still there. And it's, I think I would hope for that it could be revitalized some because the trees are still growing. And but anyway, Portland has been a good place, and it's actually grown to the point where traffic is beginning to be more of a challenge because they have there's enough people there now. I was back there in May, and I spoke at a historical tennis event, and that's where the man that was sitting there had backed me for the Davis Cup. He ran Louisiana Pacific Corporation for 25 years, and he said, if you want to write a book, I'll back it. So I said, well, I'm going to take you up on that. And so he's going to underwrite the funding of the printing and everything else, but we'll hopefully be able to release it next year during the U.S. Open, the Lords and Ladies.
Wow.
But anyway, Portland is, it's growing, and it's good. It's beautiful little hotels and stuff, and the river would be a perfect place to put the casinos, but they don't get it yet. Here's the riverboat casinos here in the Midwest. They're all over the place on the Mississippi and
right.
It's not.
St. Louis has that's part of the attraction of going to the stadium in St. Louis, right near the river, and that's really nice. So,
yeah.
Hey,
well, anyway,
look, I'd like to see the A's playing in Portland. I'd like to see them playing in a stadium that in a town, a city that will support them, and so they can grow and they don't have to live off the luxury taxes of baseball. You know, the rich are the big market areas are supporting the small market areas, and what people don't realize, Oakland is not a small market area. There's a lot of folks here.
The thing is, Portland has only one major league franchise in the Trailblazers. Now the Timbers, the soccer is doing very well. They're drawing 20,000 a game. Portland, I think, is a great baseball town, and thanks to the evil Walter O'Malley, Portland got screwed when O'Malley's move to the West Coast decimated the Pacific Coast League and took 4 of the 8 teams out of play. And Portland got screwed in that deal because there was discussions about bringing all 8 Pacific Coast League teams in together and making a third major league, and then Brooklyn would still have the Dodgers, and the San Francisco would have the Seals and the.
That's so interesting because Branch Rickey, Mr. Rickey, came up with the Continental League years later and basically forced expansion by doing exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
Do you know Jack Kane in Portland?
Yes, I do.
Baseball.
He's a nice man.
Okay.
Yeah, he's the baseball man from Bend, right?
He's the baseball man from Bend, and he's the guy I did the video documentary, his team, when they moved that first year. And he and his wife, Mary, are such special baseball people. It's incredible. So just to put the word out on that, as long as I got a voice, I got to mention the good guys and the bad guys. Mention O'Malley, and then a baseball man, and then you go on the other side.
Well, Jack Kane is really a terrific fella. He's a Facebook friend of mine. So.
Is he really? I didn't know he was on Facebook. I will look at him and try to befriend him. I hope his wife Mary is still well, and she was a dance teacher, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't know that. I just know him from just interactions with him in the sport. Because I was doing things in Portland with the Davis Cup finals and stuff like that. But Jack Kane's a solid citizen.
Solid guy. So if you're going to move the team up there, he'd be a great guy to have on your side.
Absolutely. Yeah. Anyway.
Well, thank you, Brian. It's been cool. You know what I say? You know what I mean? Cool beans, man.
Well, 2 New York guys can get together.
Hey, we get together. When was the last time you had an egg cream? Yo.
I know. I'm going to go to New York and
I got plans on August 31st. My beloved Tally and Tally Olson, the main pin of Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, are going back by Amtrak for a neighborhood reunion in Jackson Heights, Queens, New York.
Well, I'll be in New York during the U.S. Open from the 29th of August through, probably about 10 days, I would guess. So we'll have a motorhome.
In the middle of, in the early part of September?
Yeah. I'm saying we're driving the motorhome. We got a Winnebago 36-footer, so we could have beers on the bus.
Oh, nice. Beer ain't my thing, but
well, no.
New York can celebrate. We can celebrate any way we want because we'll be in the big city, the Big Apple. we will meet up when the first week in September.
Yeah, that'd be good. Well, I mean, I'll be there. You know, I want to tap people on the shoulder and tell them I'm writing this book, and I want to sit down with them and interview them for the book. Tell them what I'm going to say.
Boy, it's amazing. You know, they asked you to write a book. They asked me to read a book. We got a lot in common. It ain't just New York. You know what I mean?
I know. We were Rockaway Beach, Bell Harbor. Where did you grow up in New York?
I'm Beach 20 in Rockaway. My Uncle Boris owned a bungalow a block from the beach on Beach 20 in Rockaway. I grew up in Jackson Heights, so it's a great city. I have roots in every borough. I have friends and relatives in it, or I did have friends and relatives in every borough. Relatives are pretty much gone by now. Yeah. But it's going to be nice to be back in the city, and I really do hope we can get together and maybe
let's see if we can
toast something.
Okay.
All right, man.
All right.
Thanks, Brian. We'll do this again. It's more fun than a lot of things. Not everything, you know, but a lot.
I know. All right. Take care. All right. Bye-bye.
See ya. Hey, out there, if you're out there and you're still listening, you're an amazing group of audii. I'm going to end the show by imploring you to keep your dreams wet, keep your humor dry, keep your children out of military recruiting stations if you possibly can. You don't have to. And off the laps of clerics that wear dresses if you possibly can. You don't have to. But it'd make your life a lot better if you did. Don't have to explain it. If you need explanation, send me a personal message on Facebook. I'll tell you all about it. Take care, everybody. Keep on keeping on.